Okay. So, given that everything that's going on in our world, I figured that this might be a topic to start out with today. I'd like to start with a poem by Maya Angelou. She is a wonderful Black poet. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn of bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So the purpose of tonight's talk is to see how we can mindfully face, respond to, and heal racial injustice. And like I said, individually, on an individual level, as well as on a collective level. And first thing I want to say is I am not an expert. I consider myself a neophyte, a beginner every day. And I've learned that facing injustice and inequality and prejudice, racism, oppression is an ongoing practice. It's just not something I can do once and then it's over with. So as we know in society, droves of people are screaming to end racial injustice and police brutality, making clear that it's time for these changes demanded by the civil rights movement that started over 60 years ago, right? It's time to make civil rights a reality for people of color and for all people in our country. Now, as white people, we can easily, those of us that are white, can easily blame racism on institutional and structural and legislative reform that's needed to address racism. But the truth is that racism is systemic throughout the system, not just the institutional system, but throughout all of us. Racism is ingrained, it's unconscious, it's in the water we drink. It's been here since we were born. And it's something that we need to learn how to work with within ourselves. Our present circumstances are bringing out a lot of facts about people of color that many people were blind to because we didn't need to know. But I brought out a lot of these facts when I did a White Awake program several years ago. I engaged in a Waking Up to My White Privilege program. And I'm also in a social work master's program where these facts are brought up regularly. And let me tell you, they are sobering facts. People of color make up a disproportionate share of low-wage essential workers, as we're hearing on the news, who are keeping the food processing plants going, or grocery stores going, and other workplaces. They have lower access to good health care in the country, disproportionately. So they're facing a lot of higher rates of mortality and joblessness as a result of this recent COVID-19 crisis. And because of that, Black Americans' mortality rates from COVID-19 are twice as high as other races. Black Americans. That's really staggering. Facts are that people of color have been economically depressed for a long time. I had to do a program on Asheville, and Black Americans in Asheville make like 40% less in Asheville, our region, than white Americans. And their educational rate is much worse, but this is national. It's not just Asheville, right? A white family has about 41 times more wealth than the median Black family does. 41 times more wealth, the white family, on average. And the white family owns on average 22 times more wealth than the median Latino family. And I'm sure it's even worse for Indians, I would say, Native Indians. But anyhow, I've been learning a lot of these facts and opening to my white privilege and the costs that the people of color have to pay because of systemic oppression in this country, and from what I'm learning throughout the world. But Black people, people of color, indigenous peoples, they have higher risks of homelessness, of hunger, being imprisoned. Their school systems are many of their school systems are substandard, underfunded, so their educational system is not always as up to standard as white neighborhoods, as we know. Many live in substandard, even subhuman housing environments. And I could go on and on and on about how terrible conditions are. But this recent episode, violent death, that we're now seeing thanks to smartphones, there's no thanks about the violence that's going on, but at least we're seeing what's going on to the violent deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. All of these things are being highlighted right now, that basically people of color are experiencing racialized police brutality and militarization of white people against brown-skinned and black-skinned people, right? So now that a lot of white people are seeing it, they're all upset, they're emboldened, and they're shocked when they're seeing these videos that keep getting posted. And the news, my God, every time I turn on the news, I've seen poor George Floyd being held down with a knee to his neck, crying that he can't breathe, and hearing him call out for his mother while 4 people are holding him down. It's just so inhumane. And, it's basically murder. But it's coming out to a lot of white people. This is new. But it's not new. This is not new. People of color have been screaming. Martin Luther King all their marches were against police brutality and against the brutality back in the 60s, against people of color. And their plights haven't changed that much in this country since then. Never once did, as I was growing up, did the news expose how white dominant brutality and oppression was traumatizing people of color in this country. They didn't, the news and the media didn't show the systemic, intentional racism, the legal slavery of people of color that's been happening right under our nose, right? So until I did a White Awake program, I really didn't know a lot of this stuff was going on. The school system didn't teach. The school educational system was slanted towards, white people being wonderful, inventors of everything, and totally ignoring how the beautiful, wonderful, creative things that people of color have brought to our world. How our culture has actually been molded in many ways by people of color. So I was blind. I was blind to all of the abuses and oppression. But does that mean that I don't bear any responsibility for my blindness? Right? Do any of us bear responsibility for our blindness, for those of us who haven't known the extent of what's been going on? And for those of us that have, can we hold this all? So the first, I'm going to give you 9 steps of what you can do to work with? Yeah, 8 steps of what you can do to work with this racial inequality. And the first step is to ask yourself, what role in this system have you played? Have you been a passive bystander? Because you feel that you're not a racist, perhaps. That's a common comment that a lot of white people say, right? I hope, Wallace, that I'm not causing any trauma by my talk, but if I ignite anything in you, I'm deeply sending my heart to yours. Yeah, so what role have you played in the system by being a passive bystander, if you have been? In the race and equality training that I did, I learned that white people tend to turn a blind eye to racism and the abuses that are going on because they believe they're good people. And they believe that they really aren't racist. And because they believe, well, I'm not a racist, I'm not harming anyone, that delusive belief actually has us turn a blind eye to what is going on, right? First of all, I just want to say that all white people in this country who've been raised in this country, whether you realize it or not, have been conditioned to be racist. All white-skinned people in this country are racist. There's a spectrum of being racist, but we have been conditioned in a racist system, in a racist educational system, economic system, judicial system. We don't know anything else but the system that we've been in. So we're trying to unpack and uncouple this and bring to light this racism that's within ourselves. There's a term that I've learned called whitewashing. I don't know if you've heard it, but whitewashing is how white people tend to gloss over and not see reality of what is going on. Not only are they not seeing their own racism, but they're turning a blind eye to what people of color have been going through in our country. So we all, to some degree, have racist beliefs. We have biases. We've been fed images in our media, in our school books, in our movies. It's in the water we drink. It's in the air we breathe. So just assume that we all have some level of racial biases. Even people of color, I've heard them say that they found themselves being biased against their own race because of the messages that they've been hearing and the conditioning that they've had. So personally, I remember as a child, I was raised in Michigan, about 30 miles out of downtown Detroit, but I was raised out in the country. I was raised on a farm. And my parents didn't say a lot of negative things about people of color because, you know, we were from a Middle Eastern background, but I did hear some negative comments from my grandmother. She used to use the N-word. And there was one little town near us called Sumter that had a lot of, it was primarily people of color, African Americans. And it was so depressed. You know, their houses and buildings were practically falling down. They were like shacks. There were a lot of broken down cars and yards, and it was really unkept, and the grass wasn't mowed. It was very depressed. And I remember hearing my grandmother say something about whenever the my dad would have a new dead car or tractor sitting out in the yard, she would say, this yard is starting to look like the niggers in Sumter. Um, that was one of the messages that I received, negative messages, uh, racially charged messages. On the news that we used to watch every day, the news was filled with flashes across the screen highlighting one African-American Black male face after another of some violent degenerate offender of murder or drug dealing charges or stealing. The whole news was just one Black man's face after another occasional Black woman's face. Once in a great while, maybe a white person. So I got a lot of negative messages, and I was conditioned by the news and from the few things that I heard, we were all conditioned to fear Black people, particularly Black men, right? To be afraid of them, and to view them or see Black men predominantly as thieves, drug dealers, murderers. And what's really ironic is that my first husband turned out to be a drug dealer, and he was white. So that's why we didn't stay married. But so society has conditioned white people to be afraid of, to fear Black men and women in a lot of ways because of the messages that we're seeing or have seen. So this conditioning can have us every time we see or come upon a person of color, we can have a negative fear response, right? It's an automatic negative conditioned fear response. If I believe I'm not a racist and I'm a good person, as soon as I have this fear response, I might gloss over it, or I'll ignore it, or I'll spiritually bypassing it by convincing myself otherwise that I didn't have a fear response, right? This fear promotes us to have a fight, flight, or freeze reaction. That part of the brain, the oldest part of our brain that is there for us for self-preservation mode, right? And when we get this fear response, the blood drains away from the parts of our brain that enable us to have higher order thinking, executive functioning of our brain, compassion and empathy. All these areas, logical areas of our brain, are impaired when we're in this fear response. In Buddhism, these cognitive impaired distortions are called delusions, promoting continued ignorance, right? So as long as our fear activation response goes, we can't see things clearly, therefore we're ignorant, right? We're reacting to our conditioning, conditioned mind. So as we know, our practice is about bringing our mindfulness to these areas of distortions, to our biases, to these delusions. Right? So that's the first step, is to really be able to look at how we're participating. Ask yourself how we're participating. The second step is to meditate regularly, daily. Meditate, meditate, meditate. Because meditation develops and grows the neural systems that we need for higher order thinking, the executive functioning, the emotional intelligence, for seeing the big picture. The meditation will cultivate areas of the brain that regulate the fight, flight, or freeze fear-based conditioned responses, to deactivate them. It also helps deactivate the parts of the brain that are competitive and craving or trying to get what I want, what I need, what's best for me, the me parts of the brain. That's considered the second brain. So the first brain oldest brain is considered the survival, and this one is the me part of the brain. So mindfulness actually strengthens the part of the brain that deactivates these, right? so that we can see the bigger picture, take a long-term view, and we can make decisions for the greater good when our executive parts of our brain is well developed, right? So it's like we're developing this inner sage, our narrator, instead of becoming this judge and angry person who's trying to always get what I need and protect myself, turns into this inner sage who's feeling love and kindness and compassion and expressing wisdom and wanting and seeing a better future for people, for inspiring others, and initiating and creating creative projects that make the world a better place. That's what the parts of the brain we're developing when we meditate regularly. So when we're meditating, we're not just meditating to improve ourselves. It's not just a self-improvement project, but we meditate to become interconnected and positively contribute to society so that we can have this part of our brain develop. Mindfulness meditation, by the way. The third step to overcoming racism is for each of us as practitioners to uproot and mindfully turn our awareness to our unconscious beliefs, biases, conditioning about people of color and other racial groups. We have to be willing to turn towards them. Changing our laws are not enough. Changing our system is not enough. If we don't do the hard work of healing our own personal biases and shifting our own personal consciousness, we will continue to perpetuate the status quo, because that's the foundation. That's our water. We have to do that work. The cost of waiting to do this work is too great. The suffering is costing people their lives, so much suffering because people are not doing this work of turning towards and being with their biases. So we need to accelerate this change of systematic and institutional racism by turning towards our own personal unconscious beliefs, right? That we have towards Black people, towards Mexicans, South Americans, Asians, indigenous peoples, right? And we can, the truth is that white people have been conditioned to see themselves as superior. We see ourselves as, I'm speaking as a white person, more civil, more intelligent, more worthy. This is a bias. We have to be able to see these, bring them to the light. So the fourth step is to make a list of your biases and your beliefs, your limiting biases and beliefs that either make yourself greater than or make someone else less than, right? Make a list. And the fifth step is to take time each day to bring at least one of these beliefs. Maybe you want to read the list, not to strengthen them, but to bring them into your awareness. Bring one of these beliefs into your awareness. Process it like you do a difficult energy that comes into your body. The belief that I am superior or that someone else is not as smart or whatever the belief is. And hold it in your body. Feel how it's making your body feel, right? Hold this belief in your heart, mind, and feel how it's causing contraction, disconnection, hurt, right? Allow yourself to feel what this belief is causing inside of you, right? What physical sensations, what emotions, and then challenge it. So first you want to feel how it's affecting you, and you'll see how much pain and suffering it causes. And the second thing you want to do is challenge it. And I love Byron Katie's, maybe you've heard of the work. And the work is, first you ask, is this belief true? Is it really true? Is it true? Can I absolutely know without a doubt that it's true is the second question. How do I react? What happens when I believe this thought? Or when I hold this belief in my consciousness is the third question. And who would I be without this belief is the fourth question. Who would I be without? So if you want to look up Byron Katie's the work, it's awesome. I think we need to challenge these biases, these limiting beliefs. One example that personally that I had is that I've known, had a few Black friends going along, but not too many. I haven't been exposed too much. But the few that I have known that in my sphere and that were in my school were pretty loud, kind of loud people, and exuberant. So I made up a belief that all Black people were loud, right? And then when I met Wallace, and Wallace and I have become close friends, and every time we would go out to eat or be in a conversation with him, I couldn't hear what he was saying because he's so soft-spoken, right? Sorry, I'm using you as an example, Wallace. And then when I met his sister and brother, they're all very soft-spoken as well. So I realized that this was an irrational belief that I had. And since then, I've met many other people of color who are soft-spoken. So it's simply not true. The sixth step is to educate yourself about people of color. Educate yourself about people of color. Just sitting there saying, I'm not a racist is not enough, right? If you have people of color in your sphere of influence, and if they're willing to talk to you, open up to them and talk to them, ask them questions, get to know what their lives have been like, find out what they value, find out what they need, find out what kind of prejudices they've experienced and how it's affected them personally, the trauma that's been caused by that. One African-American woman that I befriended from New York, she told me that she lost her nephew to a police murder. The police murdered her nephew for no reason. They shot him thinking that he was committing a crime when he wasn't. And she was crying when she told me, I love my nephew. And she said, as a white person, Rania, you have no idea what it's like. You have no idea as a white person what it's like to fear for your life and the life of your children and your family every single time you step out of your house. And by the police, the people who are supposed to be protecting you too. So that really opened my eyes. So talk to people. Research the lives of other races, like people of color, indigenous groups, Mexicans. There are scores of YouTube videos and documentaries out there that you can watch to learn about their lives and the challenges that they're facing in America because of how they're being ignored or oppressed or discriminated against, right? So expand your news to look up articles about the challenges these groups are facing. This is what we did in our Wide Awake program. Read a lot of books. There are a lot of great books like The New Jim Crow. And look at how the dominant white majority has created an institutionalized system to oppress people for their own benefit, right? This is like slavery 2.0. Join a Wide Awake group if you are white and you want to expand your horizon with a curriculum that does this research where you can sit with a group of people of your own race and discuss. So you watch the same things and you get together and discuss how this impacted you. This is powerful, the program that I did. The seventh step is to do a lot of compassion and loving kindness practices for yourself, for all of us, for people of color. This is not an intellectual process we want to do. We want to bring our heart. We need to bring our hearts to the table. A lack of our heart has caused the system that we have now, right? So open your heart to yourself, to your own ignorance when you find it. You don't need to be ashamed. We are all products of conditioning, right? We're all a work in process. We're all working. So open your heart and mind to the inequities of brown-skinned people and immigrants, a lot of immigrants. I was an immigrant to this country and faced abuse And then the last step is to take compassionate action, right? If you can, take compassionate action. It's not enough just to sit and heal your stuff. Now take compassionate action. How can we do that? It's different for everybody. You may not feel safe demonstrating during COVID-19. I know I haven't. But you can donate your time and energy to uplift and change our system and whatever gifts you have, right? If you're, you can post informative videos or articles on social media. If you're an artist, you can create artistic artwork that exemplifies love and healing and connection, or the trials and tribulations that people of color are facing, that racism is causing. You can donate to organizations that support the rights and create opportunities for people of color. I donate to Black Lives Matters organization for several years now. I also donate to Manna Food Bank when I can. If you're rich, invest in Black communities, communities of color, of indigenous communities. Bring business into their neighborhoods. Can't find jobs because there aren't any in their communities. I'm not rich, but if you are, you might want to do that. Vote for political candidates who promote equal rights for all people, especially people of color, and donate to their campaigns if you can afford to, right? These are just, I'm throwing a bunch of ideas out. Bring white people out of their caves and closets of ignorance by having conversations about racism with family and friends. And about the things that you're learning about the racial inequities that people are facing in this country. And most of all, do the work of waking up, right? Wake up to your own biases and rigidities and fears. Bring your loving heart to this inner world to really heal it. And bring this strength in the heart that can face the reality, the truth of what human beings are capable of, on the negative and the beautiful. The more we can open up to everything, the more we can open up to the beauty as well. So Maya Angelou, she says, take the blinders from your vision, take the padding from your ears, and confess you've heard me crying, and admit you've seen my tears. Hear the tempo so compelling. Hear the blood throb in my veins. Yes, my drums are beating nightly, and the rhythms never change. Equality, I will be free. Equality, I will be free. And finally, the Dalai Lama's words. There can be no peace as long as there is grinding poverty, social injustice, inequality, oppression, environmental degradation. And as long as the weak and small continue to be trodden by the mighty and powerful. So as our practice deepens, we realize that we are interdependent, interconnected beings. And we also realize that none of us can be free until we're all free. And that will motivate us to really take ourselves on. Yeah. So that's just